In 1934, a widow in rural Nebraska kept a lamp in her front window every night for 11 years after her husband died. Neighbors thought she was wasting kerosene. She was doing something smarter, and it's number 19 on this list. Back then, when night fell on a lonely farm road, there was no one to call and no one coming fast. A stranger's knock after dark could mean anything. So our grandparents built quiet defenses into their homes, tricks so ordinary nobody wrote them down. Number 7, could empty a porch in seconds. Number 3, saved more families than any lock. Hit that subscribe button, and let's count down 25 forgotten blackout defense tricks our grandparents used after dark. Number 25, the crunching walkway. Long before motion sensors, the walkway itself was the alarm. Families laid crushed oyster shell, coal cinders, or coarse gravel down every path to the house, the front walk, the side gate, the route in from the barn. In daylight, it was just a tidy yard. After dark, it became a tripwire made of sound. Each step ground and crackled loud enough to carry through a closed window on a still night. Your grandmother learned to wake at the wrong kind of footfall, not the familiar rhythm of family coming home, but the slow, careful crunch of someone who did not want to be heard. That hesitation was the tell. A wagon load of cinders cost almost nothing from the coal man and lasted for years. On a farm, quiet ground under a stranger's boot was a luxury you could not afford. Number 24, banking the fire to vanish. When a stranger's headlights or footsteps came up the lane after dark, the first thing a careful family did was disappear. Your grandmother would rake the coals down and bank the wood stove, smothering the glow with ash so no flicker showed at the window seams. The lamps went out. In under a minute, a warm, lived-in house became a black, silent shape that looked abandoned. A drifter passing a dark, cold-looking farmhouse usually kept walking. Why bother a place that looked empty when the next one had lights and easy pickings? The skill was in the banking. Done right, those buried coals held their heat until morning, so the family stayed warm and had a live fire to blow back up at dawn. Mothers taught their daughters exactly how much ash to pull over the embers. It was heat management and camouflage at once. Number 23, boots by the door. A woman alone, or a house full of children with the father away working the rails or the harvest, was the most vulnerable place a stranger could find. So they lied with objects. Your grandmother kept a pair of a man's heavy work boots square by the front door, muddy, laces loose, plainly just kicked off. A man's coat hung on the peg, a razor strop hung by the washstand where anyone at the door could glimpse it. The whole arrangement said one thing to a stranger squinting through the screen. There is a man in this house, and he will be back any minute. It cost nothing and worked more often than any lock, because most trouble that came knocking after dark was opportunistic, and opportunists do not want an audience. The boots did not have to belong to anyone real. Plenty of widows kept their late husband's boots by the door for exactly this reason, standing guard long after the man who wore them was gone. Number 22, the wooden crossbar. Locks in those days were flimsy, a skeleton key, and a thin bolt a determined shoulder could pop. So the real security was a bar. Your grandfather set 2 iron brackets on the inside of the door frame and dropped a heavy oak bar across them at night. That bar spread the force of any push across the whole frame instead of one weak little latch. A man could throw his full weight against that door and it would not give. Some homes had a slot cut into the studs, so the bar slid deep into the wall, turning the door into part of the wall. A bar cost a length of scrap oak and an hour of work. It bought something no store-bought lock could sell, which was the certainty that the door in front of you was not going to open until you decided it would. Number 21, the dog that earned its supper. Every isolated farmhouse had a dog, and not for company. A good yard dog was the earliest warning system, and families chose and trained them for exactly that. The dog slept on the porch or just inside the door, and it knew the sound of every wagon, boot, and voice that belonged. When something did not belong, it announced it from 100 yards out, long before a stranger reached the steps. That warning gave your grandmother the most precious thing of all, which was time. Time to light a lamp, bar a door, wake the children, or take down the shotgun over the mantel. The dog did not have to be big or fierce. Half the value was the noise, because a barking dog tells a stranger that surprise is off the table and someone inside already knows he is coming. A scrap-fed farm dog was the cheapest sentry a family ever kept, and it stood watch every single night without being asked. Number 20. The stair they never fixed. In an old farmhouse full of squeaks, most people fixed the ones that annoyed them. Your grandparents did the opposite with one particular board. There was always a stair tread or hallway plank that groaned loud under any weight, and they left it groaning on purpose. It was a burglar alarm built into the house itself. Anyone crossing from the door toward the bedrooms in the dark had to step on it, and that groan was unmistakable, different from the settling of an old house in the cold. Parents knew the sound instantly, whether it was a child slipping to the outhouse or something heavier and slower that should not be moving through the house at all. You could not tiptoe around a plank you could not see. The house told on anyone who walked it in the dark. Number 19. The lamp in the window. Here is the widow's trick from Nebraska. A single lamp left burning in a front window all night, every night, was not sentiment and not waste. It was a message aimed at anyone watching the house from the road. It said, "Someone in here is awake, and this house is never truly dark and never truly asleep." A lamp also let her see out without being seen, because the glass threw her own reflection back and hid the room while lighting the yard just enough to catch movement near the gate. For a woman living alone, that steady flame was worth every drop of kerosene, which ran about a nickel a night. It told the whole valley the house was occupied and alert, and it meant that if she ever needed help, the neighbors watching from their own dark windows would notice the moment that faithful light went out. A dark window invites trouble. A lit one turns it away. First pattern break. Here is what people forget about that world. We picture the past as safe, front doors left unlocked, neighbors you trusted with your life. But strip away the nostalgia, and you find a countryside where a woman on a farm might be the only adult for a mile in any direction, where the nearest lawman was a half-day's ride and had no way of even knowing she was in trouble. When the sun went down, you were on your own in the most literal sense. The Depression put hundreds of thousands of desperate men on the roads and the rails, most of them decent and hungry, some of them not, and there was no way to tell which was which through a screen door at 10 at night. So these tricks were not paranoia, they were arithmetic. If help is an hour away and a stranger is on your porch now, the only defense you have is the one you built into your house before he ever arrived. Safety was never something that showed up when you called. It was something you prepared quietly every single night before you ever needed it. Number 18. Geese on guard. Dogs got the credit, but the smartest farms kept geese, and anyone who has crossed a flock of them at night knows why. Geese are territorial, loud, and fearless, and they explode into a screaming, hissing alarm at anything that moves in their yard after dark. They see well at night, miss nothing, and cannot be quieted with a scrap of meat the way a dog sometimes can. A stranger who slipped past the dog usually did not slip past the geese. The Romans famously kept them as sentries on the Capitoline Hill for exactly this reason, and farm families rediscovered the same truth on their own. A gaggle cost a handful of grain and gave you eggs and Christmas dinner besides, but their real job was the racket. When the geese went off in the night, everybody sat up because geese did not cry wolf. If they were screaming, something was out there. Nothing store-bought guards a yard the way an angry goose does. Number 17, never opening the door. The single most important rule after dark was also the simplest. You did not open the door to a stranger, not to be polite, not to hear him out, not to see his face better. Everything got said through the wood. Your grandmother answered a nighttime knock without ever touching the latch, calling out to ask who was there and what he wanted while the bar stayed across the door. A traveler wanting directions or a drink of water could be handed a dipper through a cracked window or told to wait for morning. The moment that door came open, she lost every advantage the house gave her, so she did not give it up. It sounds cold to us now, but a closed door was never the thing a family regretted in the morning. The regret always came from the door they opened. Number 16, cans on a string. Before there was a single electric alarm in any farmhouse, there was baling wire and empty tin cans. Your grandfather strung a low line across the gaps a dog could not cover, the head of the lane, the gate, the dark side of the barn, and hung it with cans holding a few pebbles each. A person moving through the dark could not see it and could not help but hit it, and the clatter carried clear to the house. It was crude and nearly free, made from wire off the hay bales and cans out of the trash, and it worked on the exact principle every trip alarm still uses today. Some folks strung it across the porch steps at night, a thing they knew to step over and a stranger did not, then took it down in the morning. A few cans and a length of wire turned the whole dark yard into something that would announce anyone crossing it. Number 15, the phantom household. A woman alone made herself sound like a family. When a stranger's knock came after dark, your grandmother did not answer as one small voice in a quiet house. She called out over her shoulder first, telling John to stay put or asking the boys to quiet down, and only then came to the door. There was no John and no boys, but a man on the porch, straining to read the situation through the wood, heard a house full of people, and a house full of people is not one you push into. Some women kept 2 coffee cups drying by the sink and a man's razor by the basin, props for a family that was not there. On the party line, they were careful never to say aloud that they were by themselves, because you never knew who was quietly listening. The whole performance rested on one idea: a stranger decides what to do based on what he thinks he knows, so you never let him know he had found someone alone. Number 14, the party line and the ring for help. The telephone in those days was a shared line, and in the country, 6 or more families hung on the same wire. Everyone knew everyone else's ring, 2 longs and a short for the Hansons, 1 long, 2 shorts for the Pattersons. That shared line, which had no privacy at all, turned out to be a defense in itself. If trouble came to your house at night, you did not have to reach one specific person. You cranked the general ring, the long, continuous signal that meant emergency, and every receiver on the line came alive at once, waking the whole neighborhood in a single stroke. Suddenly, the woman alone on the far farm had 6 households listening, some already pulling on boots. Families worked out signals in advance, a certain ring or word that meant, "Come now, no questions." The nosiness of the party line, the thing everyone complained about, was exactly what made it work. On a wire where everyone was always half listening, no one in trouble was ever truly alone. Second pattern break. Notice what these tricks actually have in common. Almost none of them involve a weapon. We imagine our grandparents meeting danger with a shotgun, and yes, the shotgun hung over the mantel and everyone knew it. But look at what they reached for first, night after night. Sound, light, time, information. The whole system was built to detect a threat early, deter it before it got close, and buy the minutes needed to wake, to think, to summon help. The gun was the last resort, and one you almost never had to touch because everything in front of it worked. We think of defense as the final violent moment and skip everything before it. All the quiet, cheap, clever preparation that makes the final moment never arrive. By the time a real threat reached the door, the family already knew it was coming, already had help on the way, and already held every advantage. That is not fear. That is competence. Number 13, the stacked pots trap. Inside the house, the humblest alarm of all sat right behind the door. When your grandmother turned in for the night, she stacked pots and pans, or a metal washtub full of tinware against the inside of the door she most worried about. If anyone forced it open in the dark, the whole clattering tower came crashing down, and there is no quieter way to break into a house that ends with a stack of iron skillets hitting a plank floor at 2 in the morning. It woke the household and startled the intruder, who suddenly understood that his silent entry was now the loudest thing for a mile. It cost nothing, since the pots were already there. Some families balanced a single pot on the latch itself, so the smallest movement of the door sent it clanging. In a dark, silent farmhouse, sudden noise was a weapon all its own, and the kitchen was full of it. Number 12, ash on the sill. Suspicion needed evidence. If your grandparents thought someone had been prowling the yard at night, testing windows and trying doors, they set a quiet snare that could not lie. A dusting of wood ash or fine flour along an outside windowsill, across the cellar door, on the porch boards below the darkest window. In the morning, it told the whole story. A clean sill meant a quiet night. A smeared handprint or the ridge of a boot heel in the ash meant someone had been at that window in the dark, and now the family knew exactly where the weak point was and could watch it. It was detective work done with nothing but the ashes from last night's fire. Some folks raked the dirt smooth under a window each evening, reading it at dawn for tracks like a hunter reads a trail. You cannot defend against a threat you do not know about. A little ash turned an invisible prowler into a set of footprints you could finally see. Number 11, the lamp signal across the fields. On the open plains and in the hill country, neighbors were too far to shout to, but close enough to see, and families turned their lamps into a language. A lamp raised and lowered in a certain window, or moved from room to room in a pattern worked out in advance, could carry a message across a mile of dark fields when the telephone was down or there was none at all. 2 lamps in the upstairs window might mean come, we need help. A lamp swung slowly might mean all is well, good night. In wartime, whole communities practiced these signals in case the lines were cut. It turned a lonely, scattered countryside into something that could watch itself, where a single flame in the wrong place summoned the whole valley. Distance was the enemy, and light was how they beat it. Number 10, keeping the ground clean. The best defense started in daylight, long before any stranger came. Your grandfather kept the ground around the house deliberately open. No shrubs against the walls, no wood pile where a man could crouch, no tall grass near the windows. Everything that could hide a person was cut back or moved to the far side of the yard. It looked like tidiness. It was tactics. A prowler needs cover to get close unseen, and a bare, open yard offers none. Anyone crossing that ground at night had to do it in the open, exposed to any watching window and lit by any moon. Families planted thorny hedges under the windows they worried about most. Rose bushes and hawthorn, a living barrier no one would push through quietly. It added up to a simple principle soldiers know and homeowners forgot. You control the ground, and you never give an approaching stranger a single place to hide. Number 9, the chair under the knob. The oldest travel trick in the world was a home defense first. When the lock felt too weak to trust, your grandmother wedged the back of a sturdy wooden chair up under the doorknob, angled so its legs braced hard against the floor. Now anyone pushing on that door was not fighting a thin latch. He was fighting the whole chair and the friction of its feet against the boards, and a good wedge could hold a door. A lock alone would surrender in a second. It went one better than a lock because it could not be picked, and there was no key to steal. In a boarding house or a room away from home, it was the first thing a careful woman did before she slept. Some families kept a board cut to fit exactly between the door and the far wall, bracing it shut end to end. It cost nothing and undid in a moment from the inside, but from the outside, it turned an ordinary door into something a man could throw himself at all night and never open. Number 8, the house that was never asleep. A silent house tells a stranger that everyone in it is out cold, and that is the one thing you never wanted a stranger to believe. So families made the house sound awake. Your grandmother left a loud pendulum clock ticking and chiming in the front room, its sound carrying to the porch. Later, when radios came, folks left one murmuring low in the parlor all evening, voices and music drifting through the walls. To a man outside deciding whether the house was empty and ripe, that sound of life was a wall of its own. Some left a light on in the kitchen and a chair pulled out from the table, the scene arranged to say someone just stepped out and is coming right back. It was theater, performed for an audience of one watching from the dark, and the message never changed. This house is awake. This house is occupied. Move along. Third pattern break. Here is what we actually lost. You could buy every gadget in the catalog today, cameras on every corner, sensors on every window, and still not have what our grandparents had. Because the thing they had was not equipment, it was attention, and it was community. A family that banked its own fire, read its own dog's bark, and swung a lamp to the neighbors across the field, knew its own ground intimately, and never outsourced its safety to a company. And the neighbors were the system. When one family was in danger, 6 families knew, and some were already coming. We traded that away for privacy and convenience, for houses where we do not know the people 50 feet from our door. Our grandparents could not call for help and expect it to come, so they built a world where help was already watching. That web of watching neighbors was the strongest defense any of them had, and it is the one thing on this whole list that money cannot buy back. Number 7, opening into the dark. When your grandfather finally did have to face someone at the door after dark, he did it on his terms. He never lit himself up. Before opening, he put out the lamp behind him so that when the door came open, he stood in blackness, while whatever light there was, the moon, a distant window, fell on the stranger. Now he could see the man's face, his hands, whether anyone crouched behind him, while the man saw nothing but a dark doorway and a shape he could not read. It flipped the whole encounter. The stranger came to size up whoever answered and instead found himself lit and studied by someone he could not see at all. Half the men who came with bad intentions lost their nerve right there. Whoever controls the light controls the doorway, and our grandparents knew never to give that light away. Number 6, the family's own code. Trust after dark could not rest on a voice or a shape because both could be faked, so families made their own passwords. A particular knock, 3 quick and 2 slow. a whistle only kin would recognize, answered by a specific whistle back, a phrase called out and a phrase called in return, so a son, coming home late from town, identified himself before he reached the porch, and the family knew in an instant whether the person at the door was theirs. Children were taught the family whistle the way they were taught their own names, and they knew never to share it. It was the oldest security question there is, something only your own people would know, and it turned the uncertainty of a knock in the night into a simple question with only one right answer. Number 5. Always a second way out. No matter how well you barred the front, a good family never let themselves be cornered, and every one of them knew the way out. Your grandmother could tell you in the dark which window opened easiest, which dropped onto the porch roof, which back door led to the cellar, and the storm doors beyond. If someone forced their way in the front, the family did not freeze because they had already decided where they would go. Children were quietly taught the escape, the window by their bed, the drop to the woodshed roof, the run to the neighbor's light across the field. Nobody made it frightening. It was just part of knowing your own house, the same as knowing where the matches were. A trapped person makes desperate choices. A person with a way out stays calm because getting the family clear and running for help was almost always smarter than standing and fighting in the dark. They never let the house become a box with only one door. Number 4. The poker by the hearth. Every hearth had its iron, and it was never only for the fire. The heavy fireplace poker, the ash shovel, the walking stick by the door, the axe on the porch by the woodpile. These ordinary tools sat within reach in every room, and everyone knew where each one lived. There was nothing sinister about it. A poker belongs by a fireplace, and an axe by a woodpile, so no visitor ever thought twice. But it meant that no matter where a person stood when trouble came, something solid and familiar was already at hand, and no one had to run across a dark house searching for it. Your grandmother kept a heavy rolling pin or a cast iron skillet in the kitchen for the same quiet reason. Tools by day, and something more, only if the night demanded it. The wisdom was in the placement, in never being more than a step from something that leveled the odds, while the house still looked like nothing but a home. Ordinary objects, ready in ordinary places, so that readiness never had to look like fear. Number 3. The valley that watched itself. This is the one that protected more families than any lock ever forged. And it was not a device at all. It was the standing agreement among neighbors to watch each other's houses through the night. Up and down a country road, families made a quiet pact. If a light comes on at an odd hour, if the dog will not stop, if a strange rig sits too long in front of the miller's place, somebody goes and checks. The lamp signals carried the alarm, the party line spread it, and men came out with lanterns to see about a neighbor without ever being asked. A stranger scouting a house had no way of knowing a dozen other homes were watching it too, and that trouble at anyone would bring the whole road out in minutes. It was a neighborhood watch 100 years before anyone printed the sign. Number 2, reading the dog. The dog was on number 21, but the real skill was not owning the dog. It was learning its language. Your grandfather could lie in bed in total darkness and know from a single bark exactly what stood in his yard. The lazy rhythmic bark that meant a passing deer or a possum in the corn, and he rolled over and slept. The sharp, unbroken bark aimed at one fixed spot that meant a person standing still where no stranger should be. The low growl from the porch that meant something was already close. He did not need to look. The dog told him not just that something was out there, but what, and how worried to be. A family that only heard noise from the dog had a smoke detector. A family that read the dog had an intelligence report delivered in the dark before they ever set foot outside. That fluency took years to build and could not be bought. And it was the difference between waking up ready and waking up guessing. Number 1, never let them know you're alone. Every trick on this list, from the crunching gravel to the watching valley, comes down to this single principle, and it is the one thing our grandparents understood in their bones. A stranger with bad intentions does not act on what is true. He acts on what he believes. So the whole art of defense after dark was never letting him believe he had found someone alone. The boots by the door, the phantom household called out over the shoulder, the lamp in the window, the murmuring radio, the loud clock, the 2 cups by the sink. Everyone was aimed at a single mind on the porch, feeding it the same message. This house is occupied. This house is awake. This house is watched. And these people are ready. A woman entirely alone on a dark farm could make herself, in a stranger's eyes, into a full and vigilant household, and that illusion turned away more danger than any weapon ever discharged. Our grandparents knew that the fight you win is the one that never starts, and the surest way to win it was to make certain no one ever knew how alone you really were. Here is my challenge. Try one of these this week. Just one. Put the boots by the door. Leave a light in the window. Learn what your dog is actually telling you. These weren't the habits of frightened people. They were the habits of people who refused to be caught unready, who built their safety with their own hands out of tin cans and ash and lamplight, and who looked out for the house across the field as if it were their own. Drop the one you're going to try in the comments. I want to know if the lamp in the window gets more love than the crunching gravel, because these weren't just tricks. They were a whole way of living awake in the dark, and we forgot it the moment we thought we didn't need it anymore.